Good evening and welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, November 1st, 2023, and we are beginning a bit late at 6:12 p.m. Our apologies to the people who are waiting in the foyer and to the people at home if you've been tuned in. We apologize for the delay. I would like to do the traditional land acknowledgement. For those of you who haven't been here or watching online, we do a traditional land acknowledgement on the first Wednesday of every month that we meet. We honor all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. We acknowledge that the ancestral and traditional lands on which we gather are land of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Treaty 7 territory, a traditional meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples, and in particular our neighbors, Siksika Nation, on whose traditional territory we work, live, and play, and on whose traditional territory we stand and where Strathmore resides. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. I hesitate to ask this, but are there any emergent new items from councillors that have not been presented yet? Seeing none, is there anything from administration or ledge services? Then I'm looking for a motion to confirm the agenda as presented. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. I would move that we affirm the agenda for November the 1st, 2023.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. We have no public hearing tonight, but we do have public comments. And just a preamble for that, members of the public are always welcome to provide comments regarding items on the agenda in person, during the council meeting, virtually or in writing. Should you wish to provide public comments virtually or in writing, please fill out the request to speak at a council meeting form that can be located on the town's website. We have 6 people who have been registered to speak. And I know we have a large gallery. This is the largest gallery I've seen in 13 years on council. I know that some of you have some strong emotions. I'm hoping that the gallery and council, that we can work together to find a path forward and that our emotions can all be kept under control. But we look forward to the discussion and the debate. And Jonathan, do you have a first speaker? When you come up to speak, if you wouldn't mind, for the people watching at home, if you're on the list to speak and you come to the microphone, could you provide your name and the community in which you live? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Worship. First, registered
So Jonathan,
speaker.
we have a public delegation tonight first.
Following public comments.
Is it? Well, I think we've already accepted the agenda. So we do have a list of people who have asked to speak publicly, Jonathan.
Yes, thank you, Worship. The first registered speaker we have tonight is Karen Van Verdigem.
And you'll probably need to put your microphone button on. There's a button on the base of the stand. And if you could just introduce yourself so the people at home can hear you and where you're from.
Okay. Good evening, Town Council and General Assembly. My name is Karen Van Verdigem from Strathmore, Wheatland County, and I'm here to address both the current and the past bylaws for the cemetery bylaws. I'll begin with section 13.12, which states there will be no items left at plots, including benches, the purpose of which is to pray the rosary, which takes approximately 20 minutes, and Stations of the Cross, for the Holy Souls in Purgatory, which takes close to 40 minutes. Therefore, standing or sitting on the ground would be hard for people with mobility issues, let alone a regular person. Many people place mementos such as statues, pictures, crosses, and solar lights. If someone were allowed to care for their departed loved one, it is not a maintenance issue. The existing headstones run both north and south and east and west, and many also have cement covers over the top of them. These factors already impede mowers going in a straight line. According to section 13.11, no one is allowed to walk on plots and are to only walk on the pathways of which there are none. Therefore, if solar lights are on a plot, it is not a safety concern as no one is to walk on the plots anyways. Section 7.1 states that there's to be no planting, and section 13.15 and 14.2 state you are not to cultivate or care for a plot or face a fine upwards of $10,000. Over the years, I've been witness to the following issues. 1, major gopher infestation, where even workers were upset as they were eating all of the flowers they personally planted and digging on the plots, which is also detrimental to mental health issues of other people that are seeing their loved ones being dug upon. 2, caved-in graves and toppled headstones, which some I have seen and bear witness to for years at a time. 3, a major dandelion infestation, withered and sparsely planted grass and weeds over a foot tall that I personally picked off of many graves. And number 4, roads that have been impassable for weeks at a time during winter. And again, I did not complain to the town on this issue because I understand there are so many streets to be plowed in the wintertime. I would like to add that for many, the planting of flowers and caring for departed loved ones is a cultural belief, including, but notwithstanding, the Philippines, Mexico, Portugal, Ukraine, and Lithuania, to name a few. Many I have met there and hugged over the years and come to know, united in our love and grief. This is what we do for them out of love and respect. Many cultures believe caring for the dead also helps them in the afterlife as well. These restrictions are like saying that your neighbor's yard is unkempt, unwatered, and uncared for, with no flowers or decor, so you should not be allowed to care for yours. Section 11.1 states that visiting hours are to be from 8:30 a.m. to dusk, which is impossible for those working during the day during winter months. Speaking personally, grief does not follow a time of day, and certain rituals occur at different hours, such as for Lithuanians, who go on All Souls' Day at midnight, where after losing a child, it is believed one can be with them at that time. The most tragic of all is section 10.1, which states there will be no choice of a burial plot location. For those who have lost a partner or a child or a parent, this thought is devastating. We want to be with our person in death as in life. This is very detrimental to a person's mental health. My suggestion about the appearance of decor, personally, would be to have a biannual public cemetery cleanup to clean unsightly and broken items and care from their own personal families, perhaps even having a community Christmas tree in the cemetery. In summary, these new bylaws affect the way that a person grieves regarding both religious and cultural beliefs. Not being able to care for our departed loved ones is also detrimental to mental health for many. When you drive past the cemetery at night, you can see the multitude of lights in the darkness like a beacon of love and hope. We speak much about inclusivity and respect for others' beliefs, preferences, cultures, and lifestyles, yet people following theirs will now be punished in a crime, if this is to be enforced. We are still a small community united by our diverse cultures and beliefs. Please let us respectfully celebrate ours. I would like to work with the town to meet their needs while at the same time meet some of my needs as a mother who lost her precious son. The remaining photos will be a few posts from mothers around the world who tragically lost children and their thoughts and pictures submitted with their permission for this evening. The last one will be of my son's final resting place that I care for here in town. As a mother, losing your child is by far the most soul-crushing experience that can happen in your life. Caring for and praying is all that I have left to give him in death as in life. Please allow me to continue to do so. Thank you. If you would like, you can read and see these following pictures. Thank you.
Jonathan, do you have our second speaker?
Thank you, Your Worship. The next registered speaker we have is Douglas Van Verdigem.
Good evening, councillors and audience. To start with, I think your cemetery bylaws may be okay, but only for a brand-new cemetery, not one that's old. Even the old bylaws shouldn't have been part of this old cemetery. And then section 811, if a stone is damaged or a plot in any way, you should be able to put it back to the original specs that you had. The way it is now, it may be changed and you cannot put it back to the way it was. Section 1312, 13.6, as long as the decorations are there, no harm, and you're taking good care of things, you're actually saving time for the town. They're not having to deal with it, which we do. There's a wide area that they don't have to cut grass or anything. 13.1, there is no walkways, as my wife said, so I don't know why that was even implemented in there. And another thing, the town is not taking very good care of the cemetery, as multiple people were stuck in the snow last winter, and the town is yet to fill in ruts on the gravel roads, which you have to bump through. And again, gopher control needs to be, something needs to be addressed all over the town of Strathmore, and especially in the cemetery, and we have trouble in the county also. Another thing was upsetting was the town workers were seen multiple times by me just sitting in a circle, enjoying the day, not doing their job. So,
Excuse me, I think we need to focus on the bylaw and not comment on what you saw as far as our staff is
Okay.
concerned.
is there a
Thank you.
bylaw to make sure things are done properly then?
It does talk about who maintains, the town maintains the cemetery for our residents.
Okay. One other thing I noticed is you have a town coordinator for the cemetery, and he has final say on all the decisions, which, as far as I read it that way, he would be in charge of saying yes or no on whatever happened at the cemetery, which I think should go through council, at least if there's any serious things to be done. And finally, we are a diverse people with very many different beliefs, traditions, which we should be able to express at the cemetery, as I hope you understand that. And I think my wife covered the benches and stuff. We need benches just because it's a place to sit when you can't stand, especially for elderly people. We're all getting there. I'm getting old, same as everybody else. So. And one other thing, we're not even allowed to carry water or use water there, which I don't have the number on that, but that shouldn't be legal neither. Okay, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Your Worship. The next registered speaker we have is Brendan Knight.
Hello, Your Worship and Council. My name is Brenda Knight, and I live just north of Strathmore. Cemeteries are my thing, so just so you know, I spend a lot of time traveling to and from cemeteries. It's how we find our history of the area, and I also buy a lot of books on cemeteries, and I do a lot of traveling to them. It's a little weird, but love it. And the cemetery that we have is unique because we have Catholic part, we have different parts, and we're very interconnected, I guess. We're not just one denomination. So if you go to cemeteries, there's actually Asian or Chinese part of the cemetery. My understanding is that do you have a plan for the new parts of the cemetery, which are the east and the west? That's a question I wanted to ask council. So do you have that? Like, do you have a plan further down the road?
Well, I would imagine we have a plan. Administration, your staff would have a plan. I think it's in the overall master plan. Is this covered in one of the bylaw points as far as
I'll
having a
defer to
plan?
Mr. Dugdale, but there's a cemetery plan from 2019.
I can't hear him. You need to speak louder, sir.
I'll defer to Mr. Dugdale, but there is a cemetery plan from 2019.
To further.
Yes, through the chair, the cemetery master plan was brought before council in 2019.
So I think some of the changes, I have read the bylaw, and I noticed that, so this bylaw was existing, with the exception of the ad of the infant, the child, and the adult. So you've changed the, my presumption, there's no correlation really in this bylaw to those changes. So my understanding is that this would be a fee issue related to 1321. And so the purpose of the changes of the infant, child, and adult would be a referral to the fee change. So on that, what was the fee changes on them, and are you charging enough? Because the idea of the cemetery is that you wanted to make it efficient and cost less and whatever. So is the town actually charging what the fees are to have the backhoe come out, dig the holes, and do those kind of things? Because my understanding, it's $400 to dig a grave. Well, if I asked for somebody to come out to my house and dig a hole, I can guarantee you I'm paying more than $400. So I wondered if this bylaw is strictly to deal with the fee and the difference between an infant, an adult, and a child. And for those that haven't read it, infant is less than a year, a child is 1 year to 6 years old, and anybody over 7 and up is an adult. So the other thing that I have to ask you is, in there it says that you have to live here 15 consecutive years before you're allowed to be buried there, which I find kind of ironic on that note, because there's lots.
Do you have a section number that
Oh,
you're?
you want me to find that, do you?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
So no, there's a, I don't know, hold on. One of the staff should be able to provide it. It's under the rules for being in the cemetery. And it says that you have to be a resident within the town of Strathmore or Wheatland County, and that you won't be able to get a plot unless you've lived here 15 years in consecutive. Who's got their bylaw handy? Page 29. Page, sorry. I've got the other package, so, and I find that kind of, it was already existing, but here's the thing. I guess if I get put in a senior's home in Calgary because of mobility or anything like that, then I can't be buried here because I'm stuck in a home in Calgary, and yet I was farmed in the area for, 50 years. I'm 6th generation here. So I guess how far are you going to take this for enforcement?
It does say that the person who previously resided or owned property within the service area for a period of 15 consecutive years.
Right.
So you're saying if they lived here,
Like, I'm 6th generation, but not every generation of mine stayed here. But if I put in my will, for example, so I write a will, and I say to you, I say to well, I don't have kids, so that doesn't work either. So I say to my executor that I would like to be buried in Strathmore, at the Strathmore Cemetery, but I haven't lived here for 15 years. Are you going to say, well, no? And the other thing is, does a will override your bylaw? That's the other question. Because as far as I'm concerned, it does. You need to follow, a judge would rule that you need to follow the wishes of the deceased. So there's a couple of things in here. Your bylaw does contradict itself quite a few times. And I understand that this bylaw gives the town of Strathmore teeth. So, meaning that the reason for this bylaw was to make sure that you have an enforcement tool for little kids that like to go out and drink and party and knock over stones and that kind of thing. But how much are you going to enforce on the original rules, which is no reefs, no solar lights, and is this, how much are you going to enforce now that this has come up again? Or is this just a change in that fee bylaw? And I asked the girls tonight if they could provide me with the 1321 bylaw, because if you're trying to make the cemetery pay, then I think you better have cost recovery on digging graves and those kind of things. See what I'm saying? Like, I'm not being, but I know the bylaw was
Yeah,
in
we
place.
are not operating at cost recovery right now. It is a cemetery. It's not in full cost recovery.
Right. So, so are you going to use enforcement as cost recovery? That's what I'm asking.
I don't believe that's the intent of the bylaw, to go into full cost recovery. In fact, the plot size for the child, for example, is to help, as you mentioned, with the cost. As far as if, unfortunately, if a child were to pass away below the age of 7, we're looking at a price rate that would be better and less difficult.
Okay, and are you going to have, my understanding is, do you still have a infant location in the current existing cemetery? Is that still happening or not? The location of the infant cemetery? And are
I
you-
don't,
Mayor, I might, I guess, interject. This is public comments.
Yeah,
This
I'm
is
asking.
public comments, not questions of council.
okay. So if you can stick to comments then, and
Okay, so on that,
Councillor Langmaid, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, please, Your Worship. I just want to provide some clarification here.
Please.
Around the residency requirement. So you do not have to live in Strathmore for 15 years to be able to purchase a plot at our cemetery. That is one option that defines you as a resident, as for resident versus non-resident fees. The resident description doesn't preclude anyone from purchasing a plot. It only defines who would be applicable to get the resident fee versus the non-resident fee. So someone someone who never lived in Strathmore before, I'll use an example, they were born and grew up in Fort McMurray, and they just go, I really love Strathmore. They can choose. They would just pay a non-resident fee.
so there is an option there.
Absolutely.
Because that's why I say your bylaw doesn't really reflect that.
Well, I think that's a matter of interpretation, because I picked it up when I read it, so perhaps that's a wording thing that we can work on. But I want to reassure you, from my reading and my understanding of this bylaw as it's been presented to me,
Yeah.
we're not excluding people who do not live in Strathmore. And in fact, we include the area of Wheatland County as a resident.
Right.
So,
And-
I just want to reassure everyone, if you move away and you haven't lived here for 15, we're not looking at removing that.
Okay, well, that's a thing that's in here, so I just wanted to confirm that. The other thing is you say you can't put wreaths or anything that's not attached to the actual headstone. And I'm pretty sure somebody would tell me the number on that one. That one there is kind of hits home because I'm also the president of the Ladies Auxiliary in Strathmore. And so we are headed into Remembrance Day on the 11th. And up until the last 2 years, I've been the main one responsible for putting those wreaths out on every veteran in the cemetery. And they don't just exist in the two field of honors, the one on the south side and the north side. They also exist throughout the cemetery. So we try to get out there and put on wreaths on every veteran service member before Remembrance Day. So I presume that if there's no enforcement on that, then we're still good to go ahead. And that's something that we've been doing for years. I don't know who's doing it this year. So, and the other thing is I'm here, you might as well know that probably the snow will have to be cleared for then too if we do the service out there this year. I don't know what's happening.
And I can assure you or reassure you that there are amendments still coming tonight.
Okay.
So your points are well taken.
Okay,
And some of them will be addressed when the bylaw actually comes before us later in the meeting, and there are amendments coming forward.
okay. One other thing that
Oh, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your comments. Go ahead.
One other thing that I would recommend is a Friends of the Cemetery committee, and I think it could address a lot of issues out there, and I think it would be a way of Friends of the Cemetery raising money to complete some of the stones and rehab some of the stones that are in place. That would be something that many members probably sitting in this room that have an interest in this whole issue would probably partake in. And there's people that you could get to donate, and we could fix up stones from family members that don't have anybody alive anymore. And there are those in that cemetery. The other thing that I would like to recommend to council before I leave in my closing comments is a QR system. And a QR system meaning that I can go to the town and I can upload a video of anybody, or I can download the person's history out of the history book, and I can go out, and this would probably maybe even eliminate some things in the cemetery that you don't need, because I can actually take a picture of my phone and bring up the entire history of the person. And so you can drive downtown, and I can do the walkabout tour in downtown Strathmore, and I can pull up the history of the Strathmore, or the old King Eddie. I can pull up the history of the, excuse me, the Strathmore Standard Building. But it would certainly be nice that I can go out and find a history of somebody sitting in the cemetery, and it might be their audio video that they show at their service, or it just might be an insert from the history book. And maybe that's something to connect with within the Historical Society. I guess my concern is enforcement on this bylaw and how serious it's going to move forward. And then there are a few things in here that's contradictory. And I wouldn't mind seeing something, and yes, probably 80% of the cemetery are people I know, being born and raised here, 6 generations. So, like it affects us all, but there's even further for some of us, right? Anyways, thank you for the comments. Any questions for me?
I don't know. Council, do you have any questions for Brenda? Seeing none, thank you for your comments, and thank you for the interesting ideas. I'm really intrigued by the Friends of the Cemetery and the QR system.
Yeah, well, the cemetery is important. I found it kind of offensive that you would say that it's an emotional issue. It's more of a mental issue, mental health issue. Some people go to the cemetery not because they're emotional, but they go because they need to. And it's all about the mental health of our community. So
I never meant to disparage
Yeah.
anyone, but I know that there are also emotions tied into losing.
Yeah.
We just lost my wife's mother. And
Yes.
everyone in my family is emotional 3 months later still.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant.
And it's more like their mental health. They need to have that conversation. They need to know. They have to have peace of mind. So sometimes it's not about grief, because when the wave of grief lifts, then it becomes sometimes it's a commitment. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't know, I'm not married either, so I can't even say that, right? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, the next speaker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next registered speaker we have is Reverend Cristino Bouvet.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. I'm very delighted to be with you and present here this evening. This is the 1 month anniversary, if that's even a thing, of my arrival here in Strathmore, now serving the Roman Catholic community here. And I am delighted to be here and have been very pleased to see what an involved and engaged community Strathmore is. Among the things that have been brought to my attention early on since my relatively recent arrival is the concern that you've already been hearing much about this evening, and it's not my intention to reiterate those same concerns. But it is, I think, providential, I would say, but also just a coincidence, perhaps, that I have the opportunity to speak with you on this day, which for Roman Catholics is a day of great significance. We refer to as All Saints' Day, and beginning the month of November, a time where we turn a lot of our focus and attention towards honoring our deceased, those who have gone before us, and offering prayers and penances for those who are in need of assistance in the afterlife in their journey towards our heavenly banquet. This is an article of faith for us and something that is more than simply custom or certainly more than preference. I think that it is not the responsibility of those in government or in town council in this instance to be aware of and familiar with the intricacies of people's religious or cultural beliefs. You have a responsibility to govern the affairs of our town and to steward our resources in the most effective way possible. And so I respect and understand that I am sure is what drives and motivates the intent behind introducing a bylaw such as this. It is therefore, I think, my responsibility to make sure that our interests or our concerns would be represented from that faith perspective. And I think much of what I have come to discover through just some of my own personal research in the last couple of days is that there may be some unfounded or unnecessary fears or concerns around the direction that this bylaw would be going, which surrounds things such as the enforcement of what is written versus the ability to be able to enforce were it ever deemed necessary to do so. And I think that is a helpful distinction to be made. Where I struggle with that just in a philosophical or legislative perspective is that it is difficult to justify putting something in writing if it isn't intended to be enforced. And then in such instances where enforcement would be selected, it could then be regarded as arbitrary or even somehow disadvantageous to someone who experiences something undesirable out of the enforcement of that particular instance. And so I'm thinking specifically in two areas that I observed through my reading of the bylaw as proposed. The question around access to the cemetery being such that it would not be possible, especially next week when we enter daylight savings time, for those who work to be able to enter the cemetery before or after if it is restricted to the time of daylight. If it is not intended that would be enforced, then I think it is a good question as to why it would be included in the first place. Around the nature of monuments that stand in the cemetery. If it is not the intention to restrict or limit elements that are brought in addition to a pre-existing monument that are of religious significance, then it would be important that would be clearly articulated. My suspicion is that sometimes in drafting things like this, the ambiguity is intentional because it gives a lot more flexibility if and when the time should come that it would be desired to be enforced. But if that is the case, then I would submit my perspective for your consideration that perhaps it unnecessarily causes a grief and concern to people who are already grieving, among them my own parishioners, for whom I must be most concerned. And therefore, if there is a way that elements that either have been intentionally or unintentionally left ambiguous in the proposed bylaw, that they could be more clearly specified as to the way in which they would be enforced and under what criteria and by whom. This would, I think, alleviate some of the concerns as well as provide the opportunity to know in advance ways in which people would have to adjust the way in which they are accessing the cemetery or trying to honor their deceased loved ones. So I just leave those two examples of access and monuments as one thing for you to consider, but the broader comment that I am making is around the area of the way in which some of the vagueness or ambiguity is being used and whether or not that could be tightened up. So if there will be something tightened up, I would propose that it would be helpful that that actually be included in writing and not left to the eventual discretion of someone who would be in charge with enforcement. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Langmaid and then Councillor Peterson. Do you have questions or?
I do have a question, if you don't mind. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming to speak with us this evening. It's my understanding that the Roman Catholic Church has been the recipient of a number of additional plots that are over and above what the initial agreement the town of Strathmore signed with the church initially agreed to. It's also my understanding that it is normal practice for the church to ask for a donation in return for one of those plots that was assigned. Would the church be willing to perhaps make a donation to the town or to a Friends of the Cemetery Society so that additional efforts could be made to maintain these areas of the cemetery, should we decide to allow monuments, different sized monuments, grave decorations, benches, and the like?
So I can address the first part of your comment regarding donations that were meant to be solicited. My research and digging into this a little bit further would show that to date in our parish financial records, we actually have only one clearly stipulated donation that has been collected over the years that was meant to be in recognition of having reserved a plot by an individual. What is not clear is whether or not those who were told that if they have reserved a plot in the Catholic section of the cemetery would be encouraged or asked of them to consider making a donation. They may have done so in an unspecified way, of which then we would have no record that that was why that particular donation was made. And so there is, I can assure you, not, let's say, a fund that has been held in our parish finances that is allocated towards the maintenance of graves that have been reserved by those who have made a donation, if they have made one. As to your second question, would the local Catholic Church be prepared to make a financial contribution towards something like this proposed Friends of the Cemetery? I myself do not have the final authority to authorize something like that, but I already will be bringing this information before our bishop, who is the one that would be making such a decision. I have made an appointment to speak with him tomorrow afternoon, during which I will be relaying some of this information to him. But I can say that given the reaction that you see this has provoked, there would be a good justification for us looking at ways that we could creatively and constructively partner with the town in order to make sure that the needs of our local parishioners were still being met, but also in conformity with what are the needs of the town.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure you can understand why it would be, a challenge for the town receiving no funds for those grave sites that would typically go towards perpetual care for things like subsidence, breakages, things like that. That's my concern there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Father Christino, in your service to the church, do you have legislative experience in drafting cemetery bylaws in any of your previous work?
Not in relation to cemetery bylaws, no, but in other domains and elements of drafting such things, yes.
I just also wanted to say, with regards to your comment about intentional ambiguity, this council has dealt in my 10 years of sitting behind here, we've dealt with the cemetery bylaw on at least 7 occasions. So I think if there is ambiguity, it's probably interpretive and not intentional. I just want to make sure that that is understood. It certainly was in no way intentional on the part of our operational persons who dedicated several months to putting this together.
Thank you. And I should clarify that I mean no disrespect by suggesting that that may be the case, only just that my past experience is such that it can sometimes be regarded as helpful to leave things as ambiguous or open to interpretation as possible, precisely for that reason.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate the distinction between interpretation
And in terms of the enforcement, I think that in previous meetings of this current council, there has been intent around the enforcement issue that has been spoken to in the broadest possible perspective. So I think that you can imagine that when you're drafting a bylaw and you want to be able to enforce everything from infractions that cause problems for operations to extraordinary vandalism, that you're going to have that spectrum.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for coming and speaking. We appreciate it. You've given us lots to think about.
Good, thank
And
you.
again, to the audience and to you, there are still amendments coming forward tonight. Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Your Worship. The next registered speaker we have tonight is Roxanne Davis.
Well, here we are. Thank you for having me. I'm not going to be as long or as great as the last speakers were, but one of the reasons I came, my name's Roxanne Davis, and we live in Aspen. We've lived here for 15 years. I didn't grow up here, so Strathmore isn't my home community, but my children grew up here. They went to school here. They graduated here. I have a son with special needs, so my niece and nephew went to school here, and they have friends that are buried in this cemetery. And personally, I have listened to a lot of the young children, or I call them young children, but they're not, they're youth, who have gone through COVID, who have mental health issues, who sit in that cemetery at all hours of the day and night, and they pray to their friends that they've lost. And maybe they're here today because they're able to do that. And they sit on the benches that are provided there and they grieve. And they grieve for the loss of those friends. 5 years ago, I have a son that has a lot of needs. He's autistic and he has lupus, and bless our hospital, he's still with us. But 5 years ago, we were rushed to the Peter Lougheed. And so just a little back history, my husband's from Acme. That's where we were married, and we spent the first 15 years of our marriage, and I had our children. So my father-in-law and my mother-in-law were founding members of Acme, just like a lot of the families here are of Strathmore. And when my father-in-law passed away 20 years ago, we went into the town office and we said, you know, we'd like to buy a plot. And they said, oh, Art came in and he bought 3 plots next to his Uncle Jess. And we went, wow, that's great. Okay, he's going to be buried next to Uncle Jess. And then when Mary passed away, my husband's mother, we said, she can be buried right next to Art. And so when my son, they told us that he wasn't going to live, the first thing I did was I called my sister-in-law and I said, Donna, there's that 3rd plot. Can we put Mason there with his grandparents? And sorry, that is like a mental health and emotional thing, but for me to know that he was going to be okay with his grandma and grandpa, and I was going to be able to go to Acme, it's not far from here, and see him and grieve him, was very important to me. So when this first came up on Facebook and I read it, and Pat, you said, you know, please have some restraint, and I went, yeah, okay, yes, I understand that, you know, this is a bylaw that you guys are just trying to, you know, make better. But for me, I thought, what if that had been Mason? And then somebody said, well, sorry, you have to bury him across the cemetery from Grandma and Grandpa. You can't bury him beside Grandma and Grandpa. It would have been devastating for me. And so I said to my husband the other night, well, first I got a hold of Brent and I said, Brent, and he said, please come and speak. And I'm not a public speaker, but I said, okay. And I said to my husband, you know, if something happens to me, just cremate me and wait until my kids are gone, because I don't want to be buried somewhere without them. And then do us all together or whatever. Like, please don't separate me and my son. And my daughter, like, you know, she grew up here, went to Air Cadets, she's in the Army, she's on her way, she's a Strathmore kid. And she's resilient, but my son, not so much. And, you know, we own a house in Aspen. We pay a good amount of taxes each year, just like everybody else does that owns a house in Strathmore. And we ask you to use our tax dollars in the best way that you can. And I'm sure that you do, and you try. And, you know, so I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with the bylaw or anything. I just want you to like look at it and think from a parent, if that was your child or a child that has a young person that has gone through what our young people have gone through and are going to that cemetery. Just, to say, like, to read it out on Facebook like it was and say, oh my goodness, like, we're not going to be able to be buried next to our child. It's devastating. So I think that it is an emotional issue, but it is a mental health issue. And I think it affects all of us. And I just would ask that you, like you say, Pat, you said there's amendments coming, and I would ask you to just please look at all of that, and please look at people's, everybody's religious beliefs, and how they're, because there is, they say there is no length of grief. Like when you're grieving, you don't get to choose, okay, well, I'm gonna grieve for 10 days and then I'm done. Like, I still grieve my mother and father-in-law's passing. Like, they were the only parents I ever really had, right? So I just ask, as our community and for our young children, that you really look at this. And if they're gonna go and put a Monster Energy drink besides their friend's grave because that's what gets them through till tomorrow, is that really worth like a $10,000 fine? That's just all I have. Like, I just wanted to, implore that maybe we can look at some different ways of saying, okay, you know what, this isn't so bad, or like, my adopted daughter lost her little one and she's buried out in London, and we have teddy bears at her grave, and we have like, it's big city cemetery, but there's all sorts of things, and people leave things and we collect them, and it's important to our family. So I just think that there's history here, and there's families that have been here way longer than, I have. And I think it's important to recognize that cemetery belongs to that history of our town, and we're not a city. Like, we have that history of, when we go back to Acme, well, there's the Davises and there's the Fowlers, and, somebody said, where do you live? And I live on Davis Street, and they said, oh, is the street named after you? And we're like, yeah, probably. And, so I think that Strathmore's the same. I think that as we're growing, we feel growing pains, but I think that we still need to look, that there's people here that founded this town, and they're important, and their voices need to be heard. And I'm just like a 15-year newbie going, can we listen to them too? So that's just all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any comments or
Good.
questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Worship. The next registered speaker we have is Courtney Jennings Beekman.
Hello, Council. I'm not good at public speaking. My name is Courtney Jennings, and I'm from Strathmore in Wheatland County. You might know me as Courtney Beekman. I went to high school here, and my mom is Paula Beekman, and she couldn't make it tonight. I'm sorry. On August 15th, I lost my grandma, or vovó in Portuguese, Florinda Pinto. It was sudden, unexpected, and something that really rattled our family. For 50 years, my mom had her mom, and I had her for 31 of those years. That's why tonight I'm here speaking in regard to certain bylaw limitations that are being proposed. My vovó survived war, immigration to a new country, raising 7 children, and so much more, yet the way I mourn her will be limited. My family's from Portugal, and our deceased loved ones are celebrated. This is by small gifts, floral arrangements, lights, headstones, and seats, so we can visit them again and again. In all honesty, just things that let us remember them and forget about how hard it is without them. Walking past, I've never seen them, and if the road is considered the walking path, it's not even close enough to read it or see her headstone. Lights. A small light lets me see her when I drive to and from the highway. A little hello, and just a little feeling of it's okay. This shouldn't affect maintenance if it's on the grave of a loved one. Ornaments. I understand some are not weatherproof and some seem like clutter, but that is how we remember those we love. In European and Southern countries, it is customary to adorn grave sites with small reminders. Maintenance. We're not able to plant grass, seed, water, or maintain our loved ones' graves. Like cleaning our homes, we want them to be comfortable. I have seen graves that have been in use for years with no grass, no care, gopher holes, just dirt, never maintenance by the town or whoever does maintenance it. Yet I can receive a fine up to $10,000 if I choose to water my grandma's grass or plant seeds and just ensure that our loved ones are cared for even after they're gone. And what about the graves almost 100 years old, people that founded this town? They're not maintained, they're full of gopher holes, they're falling apart. They need a little help, but they're not being maintained either. Or who's gonna find those people? Are the hours 8:30 a.m. to dusk? As the winter approaches, family members visiting their loved ones when working or living outside of Strathmore, we leave before the sun comes up and we come back after it's set. Asking us to not mourn when we can is limiting our beliefs and our grief. I don't only miss my Volva Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. I'm sad a lot of the time, and being able to see my Volva at 10 p.m. when I can't sleep or just finish work, just to tell her how my day was or to do the rosary is the way I mourn and part of my religious belief system. All I can do is remember her and pray for her. Plot picking, my family chose Strathmore to keep my Volva close. We chose the Catholic areas, that is what we practice, and we donated money towards 5 plots side by side to ensure that when the time comes, we're all with our family again. There should never be an issue if the money's been donated. That was done for these plots. That was done to be with each other after we leave this life. In Portugal, families are buried together. Benches, those who mourn may not be able to do for so long periods of time standing. A small bench allows them to take a seat and talk to someone they miss. In my family's case, it is located on the plots we have already donated towards. At no time, this just happened, but my grandfather received a call that he was getting a fine for my grandmother's headstone. We didn't know that there was a permitting process. We actually didn't even know that from the funeral home. They were wonderful, but we never knew that. And that's okay, I'm working on the permit for that. But why should anyone be able to decide the headstone or monument may be? My Volva has a cross and it's not attached, but it's against her headstone and in the ground. I completely understand rude or derogatory images, and that's not the place, but I've never seen any. Not everyone can afford a cookie cutter headstone with an attached vase made from marble, especially those grieving unexpectedly. We should not be limited to how we represent those that have left us. These are the issues that affect myself and my family, my neighbors and my friends and our grief. This affects my beliefs and how I was taught to mourn. I just want to miss my Volva without feeling like I'm in trouble. That's all I really have to say.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers, Jonathan?
Thank you, Your Worship. The last registered speaker we have tonight is Jaden Molina Real Magnon.
Hello, Your Worship and Council. As you know, I'm not a public speaker, but my name is Jaden Mungonin Molina. Oh, shoot. Okay. And I would like to speak on behalf of my grandfather. I sent out an email to the mayor and council with my thoughts about this bylaw, along with some pictures that mean the world to me. But I come to you now, asking for you to hear me out. Okay. We've been residents. Thank you. Sorry, I did not mean for this to be a crying experience. I'm so sorry, you guys. We have been residents here in Strathmore for 24 years, and I've grown up in Strathmore, went to high school here, and I've even worked for the town of Strathmore. I understand how operations goes and how budgets are, but I would like to tell you my experience with this cemetery and how we feel. In 2020, we lost my grandmother to kidney disease. And in the pandemic, it was heartbreaking not to be by her side. Fortunately, my dodo was, and he had been there for her for 44 years and continued to make an effort to see her by her grave every single day. Since she's passed, this is true unconditional love. I've watched my 77-year-old grandfather go visit her at the cemetery every day, even if it's for 5 minutes, just to make sure that he made the effort to go be with her. In the summer, he carries 2 4-liter jugs of water to her burial place to water her planters that we put beside her grave. That I know in my heart make her happy because I pick the flowers and they're purple. But, and in the wintertime, we as a family make an effort to go and shovel a pathway so he can visit her. We shovel a pathway for the Van Vertigums too, and Vovo, which is the Jenners and the Beekmans, because we are all in the same area. And we make sure that in the summer, we take a weed whacker to her grave just to make sure that it's clean and neat, because that would make her really happy. Like I said, the pathway is not only for him, but for other people in our community. And there was one time a couple years ago that we actually shoveled the whole driveway so he could get his car in there so he could park near, because he has a hard time walking. A few months ago, his walking issues have gotten worse. And the reason why I came to speak to you guys is because it is extremely hard for him to get up and down because of his mobility issues. And we put a bench in front of our grandma's grave so he can sit and pray and chat with her. And I would like to know if there is a possibility to have a permit process where an individual has to renew a permit every year, and that permit would be for like benches or little knickknacks that they put around the grave, and that's just to make sure that as a town, we know that people are still going there and taking care of the gravesite and maintaining the gravesite. And the permit process could be thought about in any way or form, but we would also be okay paying a fee so we could have the bench there, just so he can sit down and chat with her. I think that's... I also understand operations concern is about the decaying like plants and decaying plastic things that are there, and we try really hard. Like I go when I can to make the effort and clean up not only my grandma's grave but the graves around it as well. I know that's not for everyone, but it's the respectful thing to do. And I know the solar lights are a more problematic issue for the staff to work around and to move back and forth, but we as a family bought that weed whacker so we could clean up around it. We don't want to make it harder for the town to maintain. We understand where you guys are coming from that point of view, but we would also like to work with you to accommodate for some of those things. And then my grandfather just pointed out, maybe we can look into grandfathering how do I explain this? How the cemetery looks now, if we can grandfather that in and then move these bylaws to the future. Plots, if so, is just an idea to pass around. But other than that, I ask you all to please keep my grandfather and my family in mind and this community when passing this bylaw. We would like to work with the town to make sure all parties are happy. Thank you. And sorry for crying.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Jayden? Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank you for contacting me earlier, Jayden. And I think that your idea about, one of the concerns obviously is kind of things being left for long periods of time and with nobody coming, to maintain it or, them breaking down over time. And I think that your idea about, a permit that would be renewed that shows that people are, still coming, I think that that's an excellent solution actually. And I'll be happy to bring that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jayden. Any other speakers, Jonathan?
Thank you, Worship. Those are all the speakers that have indicated their wishing to present feedback tonight.
Thank you. So for the gallery who are here today, we still have a delegation to go through and a few other things, but then the bylaws will be brought up at a later part of the meeting. It probably won't be very long before that happens, but it is coming. As far as delegations, we do have one tonight under 5.1, a delegation from Strathmore Taxi and Wheatland Taxi. If you folks are here and you could introduce yourselves as you come to the mic.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I won't take much of your time. My name is Robert Seabrook. I'm representing Wheatland Taxi. And here we have AJ Pal Singh representing Strathmore Taxi. We're here on more of a proactive than reactive measure. Just a concern we may have coming down the road is the future of any further broker licenses being granted in the town. First and foremost, we're not against competition. It's good for everybody. But what we're saying right now is the current population of Strathmore and the service levels that we provide, we feel don't dictate another broker coming in. Not there's being talk about it. Again, we just like to bring this up ahead of time. So we're kind of asking council to consider not so much a moratorium, but a case would need to be made for another broker to come in and something that we could discuss. We could argue the point why it's needed, why it's not needed, rather than just granting anybody who comes in for a broker license wants to set up shop. It should be proven that there's a case for it. Now, again, we're not trying to squash any other businesses from opening, but taxis are more regulated in town than pretty much any other business in town is. Restaurants don't have the same regulations we have, and that's fine. I mean, we're not arguing the regulations, we're all for them. That's not what we're here for. It's just we feel because we're regulated more, we have kind of more at stake, I should say. So basically, just to give you a lowdown, currently Wheatland Taxi operates 5 vehicles. At any given time, 60% are being utilized. Strathmore Taxi has 4. At any given time, 50% are being utilized. Only on 2 occasions, extreme weather aside, do we find we don't have enough vehicles, and that's Stampede Weekend and New Year's Eve, but that goes anywhere. Calgary's the same. Now, we could put extra vehicles on the road, but that's something we'd have to talk with bylaw down the road at another time, like temporary granting of extra vehicles if needed, but we'd talk with bylaw about that later on. So with these extra vehicles we have, even though we don't utilize them, they still cost us insurance, which is substantial for taxis. We still keep them licensed according to the town bylaws, what we have to do every 6 months, inspected at a local facility. So these vehicles are ready to go. They're not being used, but we keep them there when the business, we get an uptake in business, and it just shows our commitment to the people of Strathmore. Hey, we'll do what we can to keep you moving when it's busy. But these vehicles are not on the road at all the times. We both continue to invest considerable dollars to maintain our current fleets. If another company was to come in, let's just say just open up shop, the way current situation is right now, 3 more cabs on the road from somebody else, 3 cabs from us are gone. It's just not the business there for that, because we already have cabs sitting as backups. Under the current bylaws, we operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what's expected of us. I could guarantee you we could go out there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and just, I know from last night, we were talking, we had 2 calls, both of us, from 2 a.m. till 6 a.m. But we're out there, we're covering it. You know, you get people have to go to the hospital, people, emergency runs, so we're there to cover it. We're not arguing the bylaw, it's just, that's the business, right? So there is busy times, but there's the slow times too, which we do take care of. And especially ever since COVID, and we know there's only one bar really in open town now. We used to be numerous bars, karaoke's, all these different events going on every night. Now it's just one event, and the business has really dropped at nights. So like I said, we're all for fair competition. It's good for the consumer, but we're asking like a case should be made by any future broker licenses that wanting to be granted. AJ and I combined throw about $400,000 back into the community every year in the way of wages, local vendors, maintenance. That's what we inject back into the community. And we'd like to see anybody coming in here keep the money in town. Whether that be they have to be a resident. I just would hate to see somebody come in and try and open up shop and take the money somewhere else. I mean, we like to put the money back to where it came from. We're supporting, we employ multiple people in town, multiple businesses we support. And that's what we would like to see continuing. So pretty much that's it. Thanks for your time and consideration of the matter. If you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. Can you tell me, like, from your experience, what kind of presence, like, something like Uber has in town here?
No Uber.
There is no Uber town.
There's nobody operating under Uber right now?
No.
It's too small for Uber.
The only Uber is Uber Eats, I think, but there's no.
Sorry, you say that again?
Uber Eats, like the delivery
okay.
services, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Question to administration. Are we legally allowed as a municipality to limit the number of taxi companies? I know as far as businesses like liquor stores and cannabis stores, it's the market that dictates what happens, and if they fill out and fulfill the requirements for a business license, we can't say there are 7 cannabis stores, we won't allow an 8th.
Well, yes, Mayor, typically, you're right, like typically, you know, the laissez-faire government out of business, right? So stay out of the free market. I mean, council could always legislate something, but you could open yourself up to liability from somebody that did want to establish and is now not permitted to, so. Yeah, I mean, like you said, we don't regulate the number of liquor stores or the number of laundromats or number of banks or whatever, so.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the councillors? Seeing none, thank you very much for, yes?
Like, government is giving $5,000, $8,000 rebate on electric cars and stuff. If even I think to do something, get a new car, there is always like chance a new broker comes, business is already slow. Why should I, like, you know, it's a big risk for me to buy a new car or put something new. It's always a risk because it's not under doing this regulation. You just asked sir about the can you do this? Many towns have done this. Calgary has done this. You can check. I can send you a list.
Red Deer has a moratorium on.
Or you're
Sorry, Red Deer has a moratorium on taxi broker licenses.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not stopping completely. You're putting that the word he's using, moratorium, and still something town needs more. There will be like people can say, yeah, we need more. You can open that right away. It's not that you are just crossing it. No more taxi after this. This 2 taxis enough. You still have that option as a mayor or like council. You can open it.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Peterson and Councillor Wiley.
Sure.
Councillor Wiley?
Thank you. I was just wondering if you would be able to type up kind of a business case, what it is you're saying, your point about not wanting to invest more in vehicles right now is a really good point. Would you guys be able to write something up for us? Maybe give us an example from Red Deer?
Sure, we could work on that, yeah.
And we can take a much more serious look at it. I just need time to process what you're saying, and if it's in writing, that gives us time.
Yeah, we could put something together, sure.
Thank you very much.
And I appreciate the fact that you have invested significantly in community, and we've seen such an improvement in services in the community with both of you here. It's been a boon to everyone.
Thank you.
I also understand that you're not going to invest unless you have some assurance. And so on the other side of that, you know, if you had those assurances, would you be looking then at electric vehicles and 6 years out self-driving vehicles that would be owned by cab companies? So, you know, along the lines of what Councillor Wiley has just asked for, I'd be really interested in seeing how we could come together to build a really fulsome arrangement to make sure that we could, you know, through that taxi licensing system that so many communities have, not very many, I don't think, of our size, but there's no reason why we couldn't look at it, and then to look how we could come together to build the best possible process.
No, yeah, absolutely work with council on something like that, sure, yeah.
Thank you.
I don't, sorry.
Councillor Wiley.
I don't mean dozens of hours of work, but maybe just put together something like you just presented, a link to the Red Deer moratorium. I'm not asking for a huge amount of work, just something that's in my inbox that I can have some time to process and look at and think about.
Yeah, we can do that for sure.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Make our life easy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mitzner, then Councillor Montgomery.
Okay, I just have one question is, are you aware of the expected growth for Strathmore for the next 2 to 5 years?
Well, I had a conversation with Bylaw on another matter there a while ago, taxi related, and I'm pretty sure the person I've spoken to said your plan was a slow but steady growth, and I'm pretty sure they told me like a 2%. I don't know if that's changed. This was a meeting about 6-7 months ago. So 2% growth, we're utilizing 50% of our vehicle. We can handle 2% for quite some time.
Okay, I think.
Unless the growth has changed.
I think you should have a conversation with the development office, because I think you're just in the calm before the storm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. And just while you're putting together, you know, if you're going to write something for council, I would appreciate just some feedback on the bylaw itself. Like, if you guys have any ideas as far as like fine tuning our bylaw, I would appreciate some feedback.
I know we did submit a few months ago. They did give us the bylaws, and we made notes ourselves, and we resubmitted it because I know they were going to rework the bylaws.
Oh, okay.
So we did submit that a few months ago.
Mark, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, as indicated here, we did meet with them. Actually, it was last year at this time. Okay. Yeah, so how time is fly. We do have some amendments that we're looking to bring forward here. Most of them are some editorial things, and as they indicated here, it's been a collaborative approach here. We're trying to amend the bylaw that was written in 2016, make it work in our current systems, and try to make those elements work. You know, at that time, we did indicate to both representatives here that if they wanted to have a moratorium and something like that, they should present to council, and so here we are.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Yep.
I heard Ma'am Debbie said that like the growth's gonna be coming here, more growth. We need more taxis and stuff. Right now I have 3 spare cars, 4 spare drivers sitting doing nothing. We are always, I'm willing to increase my fleet. That's not a problem. Like, that's not a problem. As 2%, 4%, that's not a problem. We need insurance that if we put all that effort, money, cars on the road with the whole family is working on this, that there should be some kind of insurance. We're not saying just suddenly stop anyone to come in the business. Just at least think before giving someone that what will happen to this too. Those who put last 6 years when there was a wild, wild west here. You guys remember that. I put my whole family into this thing. My wife works for this, me works for this, my son cleans my cars. So this is what I have put my last 6 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as a mayor who took a lot of flack when we brought in tighter bylaws, I had someone email me that they figured all the drunks should be thrown on my front lawn because we were losing a taxi company. So I know what it was like in the past, and I took a lot of flack, so I appreciate this. And we will go and we'll talk about this, and if you can put together that information, we'll be glad to look it over.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We move now to item 6, consent agenda, and I ask council in 6.1, are there any items from the consent agenda that you would like removed and put onto the public agenda? Councillor Wiley.
I'm going to need to remove 10.2.1. I just have a question about it.
Okay, are you prepared to make a motion then?
Sure.
Councillor Peterson, you're good?
That council adopt recommendations of the following agenda reports by an omnibus motion: 7.1 regular council meeting minutes, 9.2 recreation all access rates, 9.3 recycle yard fencing, 9.4 infrastructure grant applications.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We move now to 7.1, confirmation of the regular council meeting minutes for October 18th, 2023. Councillor Wegener.
I move that council adopt the October 18th, 2023 regular council meetings as presented in attachment 1.
Thank you for the motion. Jonathan, comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe the minutes were actually included in the consent agenda.
In the consent agenda. Thank you. Sorry, I set you down the wrong path there. So we've passed that motion to move 10.2.1 to the public agenda. So that brings to a conclusion the confirmation of minutes. No, sorry, we are trying to confirm the regular council meeting minutes for October 18th, are we not?
They were in the agenda.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
7.1.
It's been a confusing night. We move now to 8, bylaws. Councillor Wegener.
I move that we take a 15-minute recess prior to the cemetery bylaw.
You've all heard the motion. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? And that motion is carried, so we will opposed. Okay, so the motion is carried. And council, do you want to adjourn to the Siksika room? Sorry, for those of you who haven't been in the municipal building that often, we do have public bathrooms and they are straight that way and underneath, you go underneath our main stairway and you'll see there are about 4 public restrooms.
Can I ask for clarification? Are we going to an in-camera type discussion, or are we just taking like a bathroom break?
Well, it would be a bathroom break and a couple of questions